You're watching National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasts, 70 shows, and a 3.5-star rating on Roku TV. Ooh. Come on, man. National Streaming Sports is brought to you in part by BetUs.com, designed for true fans. NFL odds, Week 1 and futures, college football odds, including Heisman Trophy favorites and playoff odds, NBA odds of division winners and playoffs, Major League Baseball playoff and World Series odds, the National Hockey League Conference playoffs and Stanley Cup odds, and boxing wagers. Betting opportunities include versus the spreads and outright winners, also during the game. Use our link on our website, nessp.info, the Bet Us Opportunities webpage, for a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits. Must be 21 years old, and remember, bet responsibly.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
The Spirit in the Skies, Jack. That's not a bad song that old Mac bumped us with. Hi, my name is Frank Latirzo. Full-time observer, part-time boxing writer, joined by co-host Jack Hirsch, former 6-term president of the BWAA, Boxer Writers Association of America. Jack, we have a lot to talk about. There's boxing. There's a couple fights that we're going to review, one we're going to preview, some other things that are going on. How are you tonight?
Hey, really, really good, Frank. Yesterday was the inductions, the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame inductions. I'm the president of the organization, at least for now. And it was a really high-profile event, and I had to live through the adventures of Teofimo Lopez. I had made arrangements a couple of months ago with Teofimo Lopez Jr., who was the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame Fight of the Year for 2023, 2024, to come to the banquet. And his dad was enthusiastic about it. They said, don't worry, we'll be there, we'll be there, we'll be there. A day before the event in Las Vegas. I go, what the heck? How are you going to get back? It's an afternoon affair. He says, don't worry, we'll get the red eye. I get a call 5:30 Sunday morning, the day of the event, saying we have a little problem. They missed the red eye, okay? And I'm like beside myself because people are buying tickets. I promised them, yeah, Teofimo will be there. Don't worry about it, because the dad's telling me not to worry about it. So I said, look, when does it land? At JFK is 10 minutes away from the venue, which was Russo's on the Bay in Howard Beach, Queens. So I say, get that JetBlue flight. It lets you up at 4 o'clock. Well, we'll have someone pick you up at the airport, or you have your ride or whatever, and you can get there towards the end of the program, because technically it's scheduled to go till around 5 o'clock. I keep getting updates, little delay. So we're done with all the speakers. And some of the people are leaving, and we're holding out faint hope that Teofimo will be there. He comes barging through the door when a lot of the crowd had left. And he's hanging out, and he was magnificent. He hung around a couple hours, overtime with the event. People could have him to himself. He really is a terrific kid. I found out why they didn't come back, Frank, why they went to Vegas in the first place, because that was insane. With the 3 hours you lose coming to New York. They're part of the Canelo Alvarez camp now. Eddie Reynoso, he won't be Teofimo Lopez's head trainer. He's going to assist the dad. And there's a subplot, Frank, a major subplot. Ryan Garcia was in the Canelo camp, trained by Eddie Reynoso. Now it's Teofimo Lopez. In other words, as soon as Garcia's suspension is up, the front runner to fight Garcia in April appears to be Teofimo Lopez. Something could change in the meantime, okay? But that would appear to be the case, and that'll be a trash talker's delight.
That'll be a fun fight, too, if they actually get in the ring.
Well, it looks like it because Garcia is a little upset with Reynoso, Canelo taking Teofimo on, the whole buzz and everything, around it'll make good soap opera, and that's going to be a very, very sellable fight, and a heck of a fight inside the ring.
Jack, I agree with that. I would love to see that fight because what would they fight, a 140?
Well, the dad told me he wants his son to be a 140, but if Garcia insists on 147, I'll go there. What I don't understand about Teofimo Sr., I like him a lot, but he's been calling out Terence Crawford, even in private. He's going on to me about the way his son can beat Terence Crawford. He's telling me in private, meaning he believes it. It's not for hype, that Crawford is scared of his son. Crawford saw his son at the Canelo fight and backed down. His son would have Crawford's number. But how can your son be fighting a 140? I said to the dad, Crawford's fighting a 154 now. It's not a fight that logically could be made if they're two weight divisions apart.
Jack, the fight will never happen because Crawford gains nothing fighting Lopez. That's number one.
Money.
Number
Lopez
two.
is a name. Money, friend.
Excuse me?
Money he gains. A good payday. It's a lucrative. It's name value.
Okay. I don't think it ever happens. The other thing is Ryan Garcia has also chirped about fighting Terence Crawford. I don't think that happens. And all I'll say is this. I believe Crawford could beat Garcia and Lopez on the same night, one after the other. That means whoever comes in first, after Crawford gets rid of Garcia in 4 or 5 rounds, Teofimo comes in and he gets rid of him in 3 or 4.
Oh, come on. I don't know about this version of Crawford. He kind of has to redeem himself a little bit based on his last fight with Madrimov. I know you feel he won comfortably, but he didn't look the part of being invincible, basically, like he's looked in past fights. He looked beatable, put it that way.
Jack, how many times did Pernell Whitaker and Floyd Mayweather have fights where they won, but they didn't look invincible? They didn't look invincible every time out. This guy's had one fight where he didn't look invincible, fighting at the highest weight of his career in his first time out. I don't think he's eroded as much as you do.
No, I
think a lot of that was a style thing and the way that Madrimov fought him.
Perhaps that's the reason, but we need a couple of other fights for me to believe that. It's hard to believe it was just one of those things where Madrimov could run him close. You didn't feel it was close. I felt it absolutely was a close fight.
No, I don't think there was any doubt who won the fight.
Okay.
And I think about on the scorecard and in the ring.
Okay. The fight that took place last Saturday. Now, Frank, a couple of nights ago, I don't have to eat crow. I'm not going to eat crow. I'll take a sniff of the crow. How's that? That would be fair.
That's
smell
fair.
The crow, but I'm not going to eat the crow. Berlanga fought a much better fight than I thought. Kudos, big respect. He won a couple of rounds, too, and he did what he could do in there. Big, strong guy, gave a good effort where he could leave the ring with his head held high. I won't call it. It wasn't the mismatch that I forecasted. I thought Canelo would stop him within 5 rounds. I thought Canelo could basically stop him virtually whenever he wanted to. And obviously, Canelo did not want this one to go the distance. Okay, obviously. And the idea that Berlanga went to full 12 rounds, he helped himself. because now you could put him in fights against a Calaplant, a Jaime Munguia, and they're like interesting fights. I think he'd be an underdog against both Plant and Munguia, but at least he would perhaps maybe be a live underdog, perhaps.
Jack, no one. When I say no one, I mean no one. Not one person thought that fight would be as competitive as it was. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Berlanga showed up. He was determined. He believed everything he said. It's one of the best fights he's fought in his career. Canelo is clearly on the downside of his prime. He no longer can finish like he did. And I think that Berlanga, and Craig Wright, I couldn't disagree with you more. I don't think Berlanga fought scared. I think the difference in that fight was Canelo is a great fighter and he's an experienced fighter. And I think Berlanga was caught in spots where he wasn't sure what range to fight at or what punch to throw and when to throw it. But as far as seeing a guy that was scared, I didn't see that at all. I just saw a guy that just didn't quite have the skill or the wherewithal on how to deal with Canelo. I thought he tried. I thought he rocked Canelo a few times. I thought Canelo's face
was rocked Canelo.
Jack, he hit him with some nice uppercuts where I think he stunned him a little bit. Not that Canelo was, Jack, not that he was close to going, but I think he hit him harder than any of his past 3 or 4 opponents have. And I don't remember seeing Canelo's face busted up that much. And I don't remember seeing Canelo really going for the knockout like he was. Like he was blasting his arms and shoulders, trying to get those hands down. And I think Berlanga's stock clearly increased. I think people that thought that Crawford had a shot to beat Canelo, I think they're more confident today than they were. I think Berlanga showed heart. He got up from a massive left hook. And the other thing, Jack, that turns out to be a little bit of a joke, and everybody that's watching us knows this. I read that Berlanga weighed 193 pounds in the ring that night. He is a big guy.
He looked like the much bigger guy.
Yes.
He looked like the much, much bigger, which makes you wonder with rehydrating. You have weight classes because you want the weights to be similar. And Berlanga looks so much bigger. Berlanga looked like he could fight, practically a cruiserweight, the way he looked.
I'm thinking that Canelo was probably about in the low 180s for that fight in the ring.
Right. I kind of wonder where both men go from here now. And credit to Berlanga that we're even discussing that he could be in a fight of interest, something I didn't think beforehand. I thought Canelo would dismiss Berlanga without any problems. And Berlanga would get a tiny bump only because he was in the ring with Canelo. Anyone who gets in the ring with Canelo gets a tiny bump. An example would be like John Ryder, who actually went the distance with Canelo. But it does give you a little bit more marketability. But now, I wouldn't mind, like I said, Calaplant and Berlanga, they could both talk smack. It's a pretty competitive fight. You put the two of them in.
That would be an interesting fight. And I think that Plant would definitely try to box Berlanga. But Jack, do you remember when we were talking last week before the fight? And I said a lot will depend on how Berlanga fights. If he goes to Canelo, then they trade and it comes down to chin, and Canelo probably he gets the benefit with the chin and he has quicker hands. And if he moves away and he tries to box him, he could probably go longer, but he might not do the damage. And as I was watching that fight, I really think Berlanga, I think he got caught in that fight where I really think it was round to round and he wasn't sure what style to fight, because there were spots in the fight that he took it to Canelo and didn't do bad. And then there were spots in the fight where he said, okay, let me try to set him up and counter him. And when he did that, and when he went against the ropes, that's when Canelo really had some of his best moments. Let me just say one other thing about Canelo. Jack, you know the wives' tale that, Marciano would punch you in the arms and then the guy's hands would come down. I've seen all his big fights. The only fight he really did that with was in the Rolling the Stars fight. I've watched Canelo now in his last 3 or 4 fights, and boy, he really rips guys to the shoulders, to the elbows, to the arms. You have to give him credit. The guy's a smart fighter, and he knows how to break guys down. Everybody talks about his defense. That's good. But he knows how to break guys down and get their hands down and make them sore and get them off of their game with the way he whacks them to the body and to the shoulders and the arms.
Canelo, I don't know what's gone through Canelo's mind with his career. Is it mainly about legacy? Because if it's about legacy, the way things stand now,
he already has it.
Unless Canelo gets in a mega fight, a big fight, and the 2 big fights that come to mind are David Benavidez, Terence Crawford. You ask people who's a greater fighter, a better Mexican fighter, virtually everyone is going to rate Julio Cesar Chavez ahead of Canelo. But if you look at the cold statistics, the guys who they both fought, you can make an argument that Canelo has had a more impressive career than Julio Cesar Chavez. You can actually maybe make that argument. I'd have to analyze both guys' records in front of me back and forth, even though I know who they both fought. But you can make that argument on paper.
All right, let me say this.
Canelo is more accomplished.
Let me say this, and I think I think that's plausible. However, there's no one who holds an opinion I value that think Canelo beat Golovkin the first time. So if Canelo doesn't get that decision, and the Lara fight was very questionable, there's 2 losses he would have on his record that if you go by what happened in the ring. So now we're talking about a guy that has 4 losses. If those decisions went against him, as most people saw the fights and they think in the ring that's what happened, it's a different conversation, and it probably goes to Chavez. And the other thing I think that why Chavez gets the benefit of the doubt is he didn't go with the catch weights. He seemed to accept every challenge, and he sought the biggest challenges. So I think that's why people lean toward Chavez, and I don't have a problem with that. But if Canelo didn't get the decision against Golovkin the first time, which was a draw, but everybody looks at it as a loss, and most people think he lost to Lara, there's 4 losses. I'm not sure we're having the conversation.
Right, but if you look at each guy, they're defining fights. I'm not sure that Canelo truly has a defining fight where we look at one fight. Chavez's 2 defining fights, one is Whitaker. Doesn't make him look good. Let's be honest about it. He lost that fight and was gifted with a draw. And the other is the first Meldrick Taylor fight. And he kudos to Chavez. He put himself in position to win, knocking Taylor down. At the time, I was outraged by the stoppage, but on reflection, I'm more comfortable with it because Taylor, even though he was winning the battle, winning the rounds, he was getting beaten up in the process. We couldn't really quite see it then. And the referee did ask Taylor a couple of times, "How are you?" And Taylor got distracted and he looked towards his corner, towards Lou Duva going up the stairs. And then Richard Steele stopped it at that point. So I can understand the stoppage, and I could give a pardon. I gave a pardon to Richard Steele in the story years ago. But Chavez has had a great body of work. He was more charismatic. His left hook to the liver was better than any one punch for Canelo. But rather than do the Chavez comparison, what's left for Canelo? He's very manipulative in this point in his career in picking the opponent.
But Jack, wait a second. Let me just go back to what you were saying. I am outraged, and I'm not going to go into it, but I still am outraged that Richard Steele stopped the fight. So that
Frank, and Meldrick
has nothing to do with it. I'm outraged at that, okay? But don't you think that Chavez's defining wins were Rosario and Camacho? More at his weight? When I think of the great Chavez, they're the fights I think of.
The Rosario one, you could say, was his best performance. That's fair, but what do we remember him by? That's what I mean. Not the best performance. He was magnificent against a good version of Edwin Rosario. I agree with you completely, Frank.
I
But
think
when
of
we
Camacho and
of-
Rosario, Pat, when I think of Chavez.
Camacho was past it, and no one gave Camacho a realistic chance of beating Chavez in that fight beforehand. When we think of Chavez, we think of the Whittaker and Taylor fights first and foremost. That's what I'm trying to say. When we think of Canelo, I guess Golovkin comes to mind first, before
Well,
anyone
is that his signature win, beating Golovkin?
and it does. Yeah,
Who's the best guy Canelo beat?
But that's what I mean. But that's maybe working against Canelo. What's next for Canelo?
I'm not going to rule out Crawford, Jack, because after seeing the fight the other night, and I've been on the fence between Canelo and Benavidez. After the other night, I know he was focused. I know he wanted the stoppage. He couldn't get it. And I just think at this point, Benavidez might just be a little too big and strong and energetic for him. I think he knows that. I think he stays away from that. I don't believe he'll ever get in the ring with Dimitri Bivol again. And if Beterbiev beats Bivol, I don't think he's going to go near him. I'm starting to think, Jack, that he might start looking Crawford's way.
Yeah, it gets to the point where there's nowhere else to go. There's no other credible opponent. I mean, he picked Berlanga, and Berlanga's only credential was really he was unbeaten. He had the early knockout.
And then Mexican versus Puerto Rico.
Right, and Charlo before that. Charlo was, a champion, good name, had a very good career. And Munguia was unbeaten. So on paper, he could get away with those fights. But I just can't see anything right now where he could maneuver himself away from the Crawford-Benavidez fight. There would be a fight like of interest. Even Berlanga, they were trying to sell that as Puerto Rico and Mexico. When they're going out of their way, and that's their main theme, Puerto Rico against Mexico, it didn't cut it for me.
I'll say one thing.
The gimmick fight, Jake Paul against Canelo. Do you think he gives up weight, makes Jake Paul weigh a certain amount and goes into that fight?
I don't think we see that, Jack. I can't entertain that. I just think Canelo would never go there. Nothing to gain, a lot to lose. But let me just say this about Canelo, and I think we should address this. I was really impressed by how they embraced after the fight, because their promotion was very ugly. During the ring, during the fight, they fouled each other, took some cheap shots, and the second the bell rang to end the 12th round, they embraced and they showed each other respect, and you could tell it wasn't an act, that it was legitimate. And I like that. I think it served them both well. And I also think that it shows that even though Berlanga won 2 rounds, 3 tops, it shows that even in the rounds that he lost, he got Canelo's attention and respect during those rounds. And I think it was evident after the fight based on the way they embraced.
And in respect to Berlanga, I've been his biggest critic, okay? With this fight being made, I thought it was a complete mismatch. I thought Canelo, again, is going to win as he pleases. I'm not a Sunday morning quarterback, Frank. I'm not going to say, well, I thought if he did this, I thought if he did that. I was point blank. It was a mismatch, a flagrant mismatch.
Jack,
and I was proven
I
was proven wrong. Berlanga could leave with his head held high. Berlanga gained more respect from me in losing than he has in his, other fights.
Jack, I thought a little bit more of Berlanga than you did, but I did not think that he would compete at that level like he did. But let's talk about this. Berlanga is only 27. He was in there with Canelo. He got an education. He got a college degree that night. We saw that he was tough. We saw that he's strong, and we know that he can punch. I think if the kid keeps his head on straight and does what he's supposed to do. And as Canelo told him after the fight, stay busy, fight. You'll be a champ one day. I think if he keeps his head on straight and puts his nose to the grindstone, learns from that fight, and moves forward, Jack, I think the kid could be a factor in the division as long as his weight doesn't get out of control and his head doesn't go crazy with the money he made on this fight and his ego thinking that he's better than he is.
I would still, if I'm Berlanga, I don't take an easy path back, a very soft fight. I go for the money. The most lucrative fight to make. If they offer Jaime Munguia, it's a nice purse. Take it. Okay, if you lose, you lose. I'm not saying he should cash out, but I think the experience part about it, keep building up, keep getting better. I think, and I'm not saying he can't get better, but realistically, he's probably as good as he's ever going to be, which is better than I thought.
I still think he has room, Jack.
Yeah, okay, but go for the fight when you can get it. If you can fight Plant, Munguia, a Chris Eubank, or something like that. Go for those type of fights if it's a name. If the money is there, that's the question. If it's a really good payday, don't play around. Take it.
I think he beats Eubank. I'd make him a slight favorite over Munguia. I worry about Plant's new style and his new way of boxing. I don't think he'll get lured into a fight like he did the other night, which I didn't see, but I read about it. I don't think he would be lured into that kind of fight with a puncher like Berlanga, but I could see Plant, who's a better boxer than people give him credit for. I could see him going the distance and edging out Berlanga. I'm not sure I would pick him, but I could see it.
I'm going to say, who was that? Someone else was at the banquet yesterday that got me to thinking. Otto Wallen was at the New York State Boxing Hall of Fame banquet yesterday. And I kind of was thinking, Otto Wallen and Francis Ngannou, that, they got big names based on their fights against Tyson Fury by running Fury close. So Fury actually made both guys. When you think about it, what else have they really done? Wallen did beat, I forgot who it was, a former cruiserweight, belt holder. It's a Marcus Breedis or whatever,
right.
Before. So he's a credible opponent, but when you look, and I don't mean to bring Tyson Fury into the equation, but it was interesting to think the way Tyson Fury has helped opponents make a name for themselves. Anthony Joshua kind of cashed in on Tyson Fury's terrible performance against Ngannou, and Wallen for that matter, because Joshua's last two fights, he looked good, stopping Wallen in 5 rounds, blasting Ngannou out in 2. But are we overrating Joshua because the only reason those two opponents were considered formidable in some way is because they look good against Tyson Fury, who probably wasn't focused.
And Jack, that's a good way to segue into this coming fight with Du Bois and Joshua. And to make my point, I just want to punch up Joshua's record because I have a take on that fight that, it's a little different. I'm not crazy about that we have to pick the fight right now because a lot can change between then, now and then. But I want to see something regarding Anthony Joshua because I think this makes it interesting for this fight. Now, look, Anthony Joshua, since he beat Ruiz in the rematch, okay? Since he beat Andy Ruiz in the rematch, he has fought I think 5 times. All right, since he beat Ruiz, he fought Kubrat Pulev. I don't consider him much a puncher. He fought Usyk twice. He's not a puncher, although he can hit, but he's more of a boxer. Jermaine Franklin's not a big hitter. Helenius isn't a big hitter. Wallen isn't a big hitter. Nagahu, we think is a big hitter, but he has no experience. So you can make a case, Jack.
He's not a big guy. He's not a big puncher. I mean, he's strong, with it as a mixed martial artist, but that often doesn't translate into being a really hard
Okay, so
puncher.
Jack, if I go that way with you, then we're not going to count Nagahu. So my point is this: Anthony Joshua, Dubois is the biggest puncher he will have been in the ring with since he was stopped by Andy Ruiz back in 2019. So my point is this: I have said since we've been doing this show, I have reservation and trepidation regarding Anthony Joshua against somebody that can hit. I believe Dubois is one of the better punchers in the division. I think he's confident now. And I think he's smart enough. To know Joshua has a good jab. It's straight. It comes out straight. It's powerful. And he sets up a big right hand. That's Joshua's go-to punch. Okay. And Dubois, as we've seen, can be hit with the right hand. Jack, I really think if Dubois was smart, he comes out and he jumps on Joshua while he's cold, while he's still a little bit leery and his confidence hasn't quite kicked in yet or escalated. I think that's the way that Dubois should fight Joshua. And I'm going to be honest with you, Jack, I'm scared making a pick on this fight. I don't think Joshua's the automatic like a lot of people do.
See, I'm a little different when it comes to Joshua than you are. I mean, I'm a little nervous for him, not because I'm questioning his durability. He's a big, strong guy. He can take a whack. I mean, I understand what happened with Ruiz. That was more an equilibrium thing, and he just never got it back. I need more evidence than that. Klitschko dropped him. Big deal. He bounced back from that.
Klitschko's a huge puncher, too.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not ready to question Joshua's durability, but I kind of wonder about his stamina. And you make a great point. Let's say an opponent is able to come at Joshua the way Hagler did at Hearns and immediately get him out of his comfort zone. Now, the only thing Joshua has going is his punching power. And
he's got to stand his ground.
Right. I could see Joshua having a stamina issue, getting really fatigued. Mentally, I kind of question how his resolve would be against an opponent like Dubois. Keep in mind the Usyk fights. I mean, Usyk won those fights in the later rounds, but that's Usyk. The way he operates.
He's one of the best technicians in the sport.
Right. It's not a luck. I mean, I'm picking Joshua, but I have reservations. I mean, next week we come on here, and if Dubois beats him, I'm not going to be shocked. I have to make a pick. I mean, I'm going to pick Joshua by decision, but it's, a little nervous in a fight like that. I could see him winning 7 rounds to 5, 8 rounds to 4, something like that. But I don't have a good handle on this fight.
Other than the fight with Joe Joyce, has Dubois really been bad?
No, but going into the Joyce fight, he was regarded basically as just a big puncher, guy who was raw. And it came out that way. Joyce was good when he fought Dubois. It wasn't like the judge who lost it, like he sang late on. He was really, really good. He had a high work rate. Dubois suffered a terrible eye injury in that fight and took a knee in the 10th round, which I don't fault him for. Some people, did. And, he looked poised against Big Baby Miller. Okay? A couple of fights ago against Pulev.
He beat the heck out of him. He beat the heck out of Hrgovic.
I said Pulev, I meant Hrgovic.
And he beat up Big Baby too.
Yeah, and he looked good.
against Usyk, Jack, I mean, a lot of people want to say, okay, that was a low blow. I don't think that was a low blow. I think that was legit knockdown, and I think Usyk was really hurt. So I know Usyk's a tough guy, but that tells me that Dubois' power is real. And if he jumps on Joshua, as you said, I mean, actually, you should watch a tape of the Hearn-Zagler fight. If he jumps on Joshua like that before he gets a chance to build his confidence up and feel good about himself, and he puts him on his defense right out of the gate and makes him question himself, I mean, I think there is a good chance that he could win. I mean, I think Joshua's the better fighter. I think he's the better technician. I could see Dubois walking in the right hands, and I could see that being a big problem for him. I'm just, man, it's just like, again, I'm not as sold on Joshua's fortitude and durability as you are. I think this is a real tough fight. I'll make a pick before the show, but I'm going back and forth. I was thinking Joshua all along, but I'm picturing the pressure on there. He's getting to whose confidence has totally escalated. And there's a path for Dubois, Jack. There's a path for him to win that fight.
Well, I want you to consider this. This is a mega fight in England. Mega. And Dubois has been in some meaningful fights, to get to this stage, because you have to. Joshua's been in this type of atmosphere. Packed stadium. I mean, the buzz is big all over England for this fight, and they're both Britishers.
Who would have a better chance in a rematch with Usyk? Let's just say who would be, if Usyk beats Fury, okay, who would have a better chance? Would Joshua have a better chance going at him, seeing him for a third time, or would Dubois have a better chance this time?
Great question.
I think Joshua would.
I think Joshua would have the better chance. Dubois, how much better could he do against Usyk, logically speaking?
Yeah.
And Joshua, if he could tweak things and be a little better in a couple of rounds, because in one of the fights, I think, what was it, the rematch? I mean, Joshua was pretty much even going into the 10th round. I mean, in both fights, you could argue he was even going into the 10th round. Arguably, some people might think he was slightly ahead, and then Usyk, basically swept
Usyk clearly won the last 3 rounds of both fights.
Yeah, the first fight, though, they rang the bell early. Joshua was in danger of getting knocked out.
Yeah, about 10 seconds early. But I said Usyk was winning those fights.
And
down the stretch.
It's kind of like, it reminds me, Joshua Usyk, about, I forgot who the runner was. It was a track runner. He'd be racing the 200 meters against Michael Johnson, and he'd always come behind him and he'd say, I can't run that time Michael Johnson did. And the coach said, Michael Johnson won't be able to run that time again either. He'll come back to you. Maybe if Usyk just declines a teeny bit, even if he doesn't, if Joshua can improve just a little bit, maybe even if it's just in the confidence department, a tiny bit extra stamina, whatever. Yeah, and that can make all the difference. And then there's the element of judges, Frank. You and I could legitimately feel Usyk beats Joshua in the third fight, 7 rounds to 5. And guess what? Joshua gets the decision. He got one of the judges' votes in the rematch. Glenn Feldman. And Joshua
is bigger money, Jack. If you look at the business side of this, nobody wants to see Dubois fight Fury. Say he were to beat Usyk. We just discussed that there's not much of a chance for him beating Usyk.
We don't want to see Joshua and Usyk again. That's kind of the problem. Eddie Hearn badly wants, obviously, his man Joshua to win, but he badly wants Fury to beat Usyk because it's
that's a sellable fight.
More than sellable, it's especially England. I mean, it's off the rails. It's crazy. It's so big, and in the boxing world, it would be massively big, and it would be an unpredictable fight because of the styles and everything involved. Usyk Joshua. is going to be a nip and tuck fight, a good part
Yeah,
of
we've
the
seen
way.
24 rounds. There's not a big variance there.
Yeah, that a third fight's not going to vary a great deal. That's not to say Joshua can't make certain adjustments and do a little bit better and perhaps beat him in a third fight, but it'll go basically the same as the first.
Jack,
two.
you know they have skull sessions, and they'll put the coaches in a room before a game, and they'll just talk like we are, and they'll bounce things off each other, and then through that, somebody will say something that'll spark a thought in somebody else's mind that nobody thought of, and then they come up with either a game plan or a strategy or a play. Now, us bantering back and forth, like we just did with Usyk, Joshua, and Dubois, has caused me. I'll make my pick. Here's what this conversation has done to me. I'm thinking to myself, the money points to Joshua. If it's a close fight, he gets a decision. Joshua is at the end of his career, basically, and to salvage his legacy, he needs a couple big wins. He probably looks at Dubois as a guy who he has seen him lose twice. He doesn't look at him as being invincible. He may be riding a little high off of the win over Ngannou. I'm going to go with Joshua here to win this fight and maybe to be the fighter that we have thought he could be, where he comes out like Lennox Lewis did against Rockman in the rematch or Galata, and he just lets it all hang out and says, I'm going to die trying, but I'm going to go out my way. I'm going to pick Joshua, late round stoppage, not confident, but after connecting all the dots and the fact that he did so much better against Usyk than Dubois did. I know 1-1 it doesn't equal 2 all the time in boxing. A plus B doesn't equal C. But I'm going to go with Joshua, Jack. And if he gets beaten, he gets stopped, it'll just reinforce my thought that a little bit, maybe a little chinny. But I think if there's going to be a night where he steps up and looks like the killer some of us thought he was going to be, it has to be Saturday night.
Frank, I think you're a little too much of a skeptic by saying, well, the money favors Joshua, so the judges are. I think the judges are going to be completely honest. They're not going to intentionally score rounds for Joshua because it's better business. But with that said, we understand if it's a round that could go any way, it helps the fighter who's better for business because psychologically, the judges might tilt his way. But keep in mind, Usyk did, he got the decision over Fury. Wouldn't it have been better for business if Fury had gotten the decision over Usyk and then fought Joshua or something in the
Jack, but that
step aside or something like that?
But this is 2 Brits. There's a difference here. And Joshua is the adopted son. I just think that I think in this case, it'll be more of a factor. I think they scored the Usyk Fury fights correctly. We know where the fights were. Usyk clearly won, and they had it close, and it was a close fight. I didn't have a problem with the scoring. But I think this time, Jack, I think the home cooking is going to be in Joshua's corner a little bit more. Let's talk about another fight that we have to discuss, or I want to discuss a little bit, because it was kind of sad to see Danny Garcia go out that way. I caught that fight, Jack. I told you I wasn't going to get the card. What happened was the Georgia Kentucky.
You got to call your boy. You sold out, Frank. You spending $90.
The Georgia Kentucky game ended in time, Jack. The 13-12 game. I thought, I'm wide awake now. What am I going to do? The Garcia fights probably. I had a buddy of mine. I said, send me a text when Garcia and Lara walk into the ring, because if there's no football, I want to see it. So what happened was, my buddy sent me a text. He said, Frank, it's starting in about 10 minutes. The Georgia game ended. So I got it. I got to see Garcia. And Jack, it's a shame. He had nothing mentally or physically. The shot that dropped him would have never tickled him 5 years ago. He's clearly at the end, and you could see after the second or third round, he didn't even want to be there.
What did he do? He's won one fight in 4 years, and he gets in the world title fight. That's why boxing's a joke.
When you have a name, Jack.
Joke. To me, it was him against Lara. It's still an acceptable fight to put like on a pay-per-view card. It's obviously not a cheap support, but there's a little name value there. And, I doubt if we see Garcia fight again.
I didn't think he was going to win, but I thought he would do better than he did. And it was obvious after the third or fourth round, he had no answers. He just looked like he didn't want to be there. The shots were bothering him. Look, he's had a really good career. He's invested his money well. He got everything he could out of the sport with his talent. And Jack, if you look at his record, he only lost to the best of the best.
And let's say a fight like this, I don't know what he got. Let's say he's getting a million or whatever. Maybe more. I just don't know what the purse breakdown was. But sometimes when you're really smart like Danny Garcia, you think, okay, after taxes, this and this, I could get that. I could buy an extra condo. I can, put it in a CD. Maybe he's thinking along those lines. But you got the feeling with Danny Garcia, he wasn't back in the ring for the glory. It was like a business thing. There's still a chance, to get a nice check. And if I win,
and if he wins, he gets a bigger check the next time.
Legacy. He was saying that if he won this fight and wins another title beforehand, though, he was saying that would put him up there with the Sugar Ray Leonards and the Roberto Durans. What could I tell
He wasn't quite that good.
No, not at all. But Danny Garcia was a bit underrated. If you just look at his resume, there were a lot of good wins there. But the bottom line is this. If you compare him to the elite fighters of his era, his weight class, he came a little short. Obviously, he wasn't as good as Terrence Crawford, who he never fought. Keith Thurman beat him. Sean Porter beat him. In close
Earl Spence beat him.
Errol Spence beat him. He could compete with those guys. He could win rounds against those guys and give them really good fights, push them to the limit. But he was always in the back seat when it came to the elite guys. He never really seriously challenged, the top dogs.
On a given night, he could score the upset. But yes, he was not.
Yeah,
he was not upper tier world class. He was a world class fighter, but not upper tier.
A weak chin to Amir Khan, he could upset, guys like that. Yeah, but the top of the line guys, he could beat the
the best of the best. He was like a little short.
Not the best, right? Exactly. But he had a heck of a career. And listen, maybe he gets in the Hall of Fame in Canastota. I mean, if you just look at his resume, it wouldn't be outrageous if he, somehow made it. Even
were you impressed with Lara? I wasn't all that impressed with Lara. I can see the erosion in him too.
Early in Lara's career, I thought he was one of the most boring fighters I ever saw. Completely safety first, but he changed his style over the years. He doesn't have a big punch, and I guess we talked about a legacy fight before. Like with Canelo, I mean, I guess Lara's legacy fight is when he ran Canelo close and lost the tight decision that could have gone either way.
A lot of people thought he won that fight.
Yeah, I guess that would be his ultimate legacy. That's what jumps out at you before any other fight.
I was thinking about it. Here they are both fighting on the same card at a high level in a title match, and they're both still around.
Yeah.
Jack, today, is there anything else you want to cover?
No, well, there were a lot of characters, interesting characters, former fighters at the Hall of Fame banquet. Vito Antuofermo is always a regular. He was hanging out and talking, with me. And I love Vito because Vito makes me look good. I was a sparring partner in the amateurs. So Vito exaggerates how good I was. Like jokes around. He says, I couldn't hit this bleeping guy. And for people, Frank, who had no idea that I was a sparring partner in the amateurs and just know me as Jack, the writer, the guy at all these functions, their mouth is hanging open. At first, they think Vito's joking, then they say, "Is he serious?" And then they're listening in. I know what I ever told you the story. I was in the gym and I witnessed up close and personal the time Vito was brought to the gym, the Sweeney Center PAL in Brooklyn, as a kid for the first time. The police officer who brought him in turned out to be a well-known boxing judge later on, Joe Dwyer. Joe Dwyer was a police officer, brought Vito in. I started a few weeks before Vito, and I remember just Joe Dwyer bringing Vito up to myself, and I was with the coach, Joe LaGuardia, and I was just like staring at Vito, looking at him. And could you imagine you froze that moment, and you went around the room and said what everyone would become? You'd say Joe Dwyer, well-known boxing judge in the future, Jack Hirsch, president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. But then you'd be astounded, and Vito Antuofermo, undisputed world middleweight champion. It would be insane to freeze that moment.
Did you ever see the clips of he and Barkley going back and forth? Who would have won if they fought in their prime?
Well, they joke around. Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley's a wonderful guy. Iran Barkley's very close friends with Dennis Milton. I don't know that people remember Dennis Milton. He was a good middleweight who fought.
I remember him.
Title, never quite elite. But John Reitz, who managed both of them, and I want to say something about John Reitz, one of the most decent guys you're going to find. He still looks after the guys he managed. He always pays for their ticket to go to all these banquets, all these things. He picks them up. He looks after them still. He doesn't gain a penny out of this. He loses money out of his own pocket. He is such a classy guy, John Reitz. I can't. I can't say enough good about him. So he has Dennis Milton and Iran Barkley, close friends. Now, Milton beat Barkley in the amateurs. Dennis Milton had won 4 Golden Glove championships in a row. And I don't think Iran ever won the Golden Gloves in New York. So I start teasing Iran about the fight. I'm saying, well, I think Dennis was a much better fighter. He hurt you with a right hand when you fought. And Barkley, this went on at the Boxing Writers. Then Barkley's getting steam. Dennis didn't hurt me. Yeah, he had you down, right, Dennis? And Barkley, the competitive side on him is coming out. He loves his buddy Dennis Milton, but it was, yeah. But Barkley is a good guy. He comes to all these functions here in New York. It's in New York. We all love Iran Barkley, but we used to sing him. But for out-of-town people coming to a New York banquet for the first time, they spot Barkley and they want to go over. I saw Lee Wood, the British fighter, belt holder, and a friend of his come up to Barkley at a banquet, like all excited. There's Iran Barkley, because they hadn't seen him around New York. And, good guy. Is Barkley a Hall of Famer to you? He's not in.
No. Close call, but no.
2 wins over.
No, it's a. I don't have his record off the top of my head. I know some of his big fights. He had some big wins, but I don't think he quite makes the cut.
Let me ask you this. This is interesting. Comparing it to Russell Wilson in football with boxing, some people might feel that Russell Wilson might be playing himself out of the Hall of Fame. Like, had he retired at a certain point from the Seattle Seahawks, he'd be a Hall of Famer. But if you perform poorly for a number of years after that, you could conceivably play your way out of it. Did Barkley fight himself out of the Hall of Fame? Maybe any fighter. Have you thought of any fighter who maybe by continuing on and losing a couple of fights that we remember, had he retired early, he'd be a Hall of Fame? I'm not talking about legacy, hurting a guy's legacy. I'm talking about hurting
Shane Mosley.
Shane Mosley's in the Hall of Fame, though.
He is in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one.
Yeah, I didn't. I can't. I didn't realize he was in, Jack.
Yeah, he is.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but when you talk about guys at the end of their career, he did go on a little too long. And boy, if he would have stayed at 135 or 140, he would have been a terror.
Yeah, Shane Mosley had an issue, but still got in the Hall of Fame, you know? So,
He was a terror at 135. And remember, like Durant, he skipped 140 and went to 47.
You know, there's something I want to do with you, maybe next show. And this is a hard one. You'd have to give a one-word answer. All these great fighters, even one's not great. You'd have to use the word underachiever or overachiever. You can't cop out. If you have to name one or the other, I'll give you one, okay? Muhammad Ali, overachiever or underachiever?
It's hard to call Ali an underachiever, but when you look at the end of his career, you could see that after he beat George Foreman, he was never in shape again.
He said he could have done more. I agree. He was an underachiever. Had he been completely dedicated, he would have been better. I always wonder, Frank, the first Ken Norton fight, had Ali been in shape for that fight? Let's say he thought, wow, let's say he knew how good Norton was. No one else knew how good Norton was. And it turned up in tip-top shape. It was a close fight that he lost, out of shape. He would have been, how much better would he have been? Would it still have come down to a close decision that he would have probably won a tight decision if he came in tip-top shape? Or could he have beaten that Norton in the first fight 9 rounds to 3? Because as confident as Norton was, he had to have some apprehension. I'm in with the great Muhammad Ali. Even if Norton lost 9 rounds to 3, he would have left the ring feeling good about himself for the first fight.
Jack, I think Norton runs the 70s Ali, even in shape, close. I just think it was a style thing, and they could fight countless times, and they did. I think they're always going to be close and disputed. But the first time, if Ali's in good shape, like he was a couple months before for Joe Bugner, maybe Ali wins 8-4, 9-3, 8-3-1, something like that.
And chances are, perhaps he could avoid fighting Norton again. You know, perhaps, probably he'd have to give him a rematch at some point and show up.
Jack, let's mention our buddy there, Little Holmes. He watches every day. He's a big Larry Holmes fan, obviously. Some people feel that he truly never beat Norton. I think he clearly beat Norton the second time. I thought he edged him out the third time, but if someone tells me that Norton edged the fight out, I don't have a problem with that. My only problem is Norton gave away the last round.
Ali or Holmes? Ali or Holmes? Wait.
Ali and Norton.
Oh, Ali and Norton.
Some people think Ali never really beat him.
I scored the 3 Ali fights. The first fight, I had Norton up by a point. And he got a split decision. The second fight, I had Ali up by a point, and it reflected. Now, the third fight, I had Norton up 8 rounds to 7, but I gave Norton the 15th round. I wasn't sure who to give that round to. I was kind of like, wow. And maybe Norton.
So you had it really close.
When the final bell rang, I had no idea who was going to get the decision. To me, it was that close. You know, but I think part of it is Ali being Ali, and he was favored, you know, and Norton had that underdog status even in the third fight. You tend to go for the underdog. Like, take the Leonard Hagler fight. If Leonard was the heavy favorite, more people would be thinking Hagler won, but I don't want to go there with that because maybe that's a bad example, because I agree with you that Leonard deserved the decision in that fight. But certain decisions are based on expectations, who the favorite is.
Jack, I've said all along, I felt all 3 Ali Frazier fights and all 3 Ali Norton fights were scored correctly.
What would have happened had Frazier met Norton? They never fought.
I think Frazier beats him. I think he backs him up, beats on his body, makes him fight inside, totally neutralizes Norton's overhand right and his left hook. He's not going to beat Frazier with left hooks, and he's not going to beat him with his jab. I think Frazier clearly beats him, and I think he stops him.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way. But, you know, if they fought 10 times, Frazier wouldn't have won all 10. I mean, no,
I have a hard time picturing them fighting 10 times. All I can
Yeah.
say is this, Jack. If they're at their best all 10 times they fight, I think Frazier would go 10-0. I
okay.
think they're different levels of fighter. I'm not even sure Norton belongs in the Hall of Fame, Jack. And I know some people.
We only have a few seconds. Tonight's game, Falcons at Eagles. Who are you picking?
I'm going to cheer like heck for the Falcons, but I think the Eagles are going to win and they're going to start to separate themselves. This is the perfect weekend for them to win, Jack, because the Niners and the Cowboys lost. This gives the Eagles a leg up and being the best 2-0 team in the East, in the NFC,
Okay.
actually.
Okay, we'll see. Till next week, Frank. Looking forward to it next week.
Jack, good time. We both like Joshua to win. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Okay.